She locked the door every single night. It was a small habit, barely worth mentioning, the kind of thing you do without thinking about it: check the handle, hear the click, go to bed. Her fiancé Josh knew it too. It was their rule, the two of them, in their first apartment together. Lock the door. So when Josh came home just after 3 in the morning, after a long shift, and found that door unlocked, something in him went cold before he even stepped inside. He would later tell a reporter that he remembers staring at the wall. Not moving. Wanting to throw up. That is often how people describe the moment right after, not the horror itself, but the strange stillness that follows it, the mind trying to process something it does not have a category for yet. Tara Rose Willenborg was 17 years old. In 11 days, she would still have been alive to see spring in southern Indiana. She had left high school and pursued an alternate path, eventually earning her GED just 2 weeks before her death. She had run cross-country. She had started a job at Subway. She loved animals so much that she had made herself a vegetarian before she was even 10 years old. She dabbled in photography. And she had this one specific, almost impossibly sweet dream: she wanted to open her own cupcake bakery someday, maybe somewhere warm, maybe near a beach. She and Josh were not legally engaged yet, but they had started calling each other fiancé and fiancée anyway, the way young couples sometimes claim a future before it is official, like saying it out loud makes it more real. Josh was quietly saving for a ring. He was planning to propose that July. They lived together at the Cambridge Square Apartments in Clarksville, Indiana, just across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. It was an ordinary complex. Nothing about it stood out. Which is, of course, exactly the point of a story like this one, because evil does not usually announce itself with a haunted house or a dark alley. It lives one wall over. It waves at you in the parking lot. On the night of March 1st into March 2nd, 2013, Tara sat on the staircase leading up to her apartment. And a familiar face approached her. Not a stranger lurking in the shadows, but a neighbor. 49-year-old Richard Houghton, whose girlfriend lived in the unit directly across the hall from Tara's. Now here is where the story stops being just tragic and starts becoming enraging. Richard Houghton was not an unknown quantity. He was a convicted sex offender with a criminal record stretching back to the early 1980s. He had spent that particular evening drinking with his girlfriend and her family at a nearby bar. But at some point, he decided he did not want to keep drinking. He wanted to go home alone. Except home, that night, meant something else entirely. According to the probable cause affidavit later filed in the case, Houghton told police that the moment he saw Tara that night, he already knew what he was going to do. Not an impulse in a dark room. Not a struggle that spiraled out of control. A decision, made in advance, by a man Tara likely recognized, may have even felt safe around, because he lived right there. Because his girlfriend lived across the hall. Because he was, in the most horrifying sense of the word, familiar. We do not know exactly how he got into that apartment, or how the encounter began. What we do know is what happened after. Tara was sexually assaulted. And then Richard Houghton strangled her, using both hands until she stopped breathing. Investigators would later find something particularly chilling. Houghton had taken a work apron belonging to Tara, the kind you would wear behind a counter, ordinary, unremarkable, part of her actual life just days into her new job, and tied it around her neck. He staged it. He wanted it to look like Tara had taken her own life. Think about the layers of cruelty in that single act. It was not enough to take her life. He tried to rewrite the story of it too, to leave her family believing their daughter had been in so much pain that she chose to end things herself, rather than facing the truth of what he had done to her. That is the scene Josh Lewis walked into at 3 in the morning. His fiancé, on the floor near their bed. An apron around her neck. He did not panic and run. He cut the apron away and started CPR, even though, as he would later realize, it was already far too late. Then he went to the one place he could think of for help. His neighbor's door. The one across the hall. He knocked, and the door opened, and sitting right there inside the apartment was Richard Hooten. Josh had no idea, in that moment, that he was looking at the man who had just killed the woman he loved. He asked Hooten to call 911, but Hooten left the scene instead, fleeing the apartment complex and hiding out at a nearby abandoned gas station. Police and paramedics arrived. And Tara Willenborg was pronounced dead. By Sunday, the very next day, investigators had zeroed in on Hooten. He was found about a mile from the crime scene, hiding in the bathroom of an abandoned gas station. It turned out he also had an unrelated warrant out for his arrest. The Clark County coroner determined Tara's cause of death was asphyxia. Prosecutor Steve Stewart did not mince words when he spoke to reporters. He called it a horrible death. He said they anticipated charging Hooten not just with murder, but with rape and criminal deviant conduct as well. In April of 2013, just weeks after the murder, Richard Hooten did something almost no defendant does. He spoke to the media. Before trial, he described, in graphic detail, exactly what he had done to Tara. He confessed to raping her. He confessed to choking her until she could not breathe. And in a detail that expanded the horror of this case even further, he told reporters that Tara was not his only victim, that he had raped at least 4 other women. He drew one line, though, and held to it. He insisted that Tara was the only person he had ever murdered. You can imagine what that did to a community already reeling. It was not just that a 17-year-old girl had been murdered in her own apartment by a neighbor. It was the realization that this man had been moving through their town, through their bars, through their apartment complexes, for years, a serial predator hiding in plain sight, one door down from an ordinary young couple just starting their life together. Investigators in Louisville's sex crimes unit had, in fact, already been looking at Hooten in connection with a separate, unrelated assault earlier that same year, a case that had nothing to do with Tara, and everything to do with the pattern of who Richard Hooten really was. Prosecutor Stewart made his intentions clear early on. He said Hooten should never see the light of day again, and he began pursuing the death penalty. While the legal process ground forward, Tara's family had to do something no parent should ever have to do, plan a funeral for their teenage daughter while the details of her final hours were still being picked apart in headlines. Her father, Todd Willenborg, and her mother, Kelly Curran, stood together through it. For over a year, the case moved through the system. Prosecutors continued to push for the death penalty, and by mid-2013, they formally recommended it. Any capital case comes with an enormous number of legal requirements, and Clark County's prosecutor was careful to note that they intended to follow every single one of them precisely, methodically, so that nothing could later unravel the case on a technicality. But in March of 2014, the case took its final turn. Richard Hooten agreed to plead guilty to rape, to murder, to criminal deviant conduct, and to being a habitual offender. In exchange, he avoided the death penalty. For Tara's family, the plea deal was not really about mercy for Houghton. It was about closure for them. As her father put it afterward, "We do not have to hear from him anymore." That was the important part. Not vengeance. Not a courtroom spectacle stretching on for years. Just an ending. A guarantee that this man would spend the rest of his life in prison and would never again have a platform, a microphone, or a chance to speak about what he had done. In July of 2014, Richard Houghton was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 70 years. As he walked into the courtroom for sentencing, he reportedly told a reporter he was sorry for what he had done. Whatever that apology was worth to him, it changed nothing for the people who mattered. Tara's father said simply that it was not exactly a happy day. There is no version of that day that could have been happy. There was only the version where the man responsible would never again be free to hurt anyone. Back in downtown Jeffersonville, there is a wall that bears her nickname, Pixie, the name her mother says fit her because Tara was always in a hurry to grow up. And in Walnut Ridge Cemetery, not far from that wall, there is a tombstone with her name on it, marking a life that ended 11 days before her 18th birthday, and decades before any of the futures she had started quietly planning for herself.